try
Go
to,
ahead.
I've got to sort of reconstitute my, yes.
My name is
Rehabilitate
Monroe.
yourself.
I work for Breitbart. I'm wondering if you can tell me what Speaker Ryan is planning to do with his task force on immigration, and if he seriously would be willing to pick up the Senate version, the Senate reform bill from Grassley.
This will be a quick answer. I have no idea what the Senate, what the Speaker plans to do. There is a immigration working group in the House, as they had in the Senate. When I talked to Bob yesterday on the floor, Bob Goodlatte, there was a sense of urgency now that the Senate has come out, that the House needs to come out with their working group recommendations as well, which I am led to believe will include E-Verify.
Fair enough. Then the second question. So Texas is a very Republican state, but it's a growing population of minorities and immigrants. At some point, it's going to turn blue. You're in the Texas delegation. Does the Texas delegation ever talk about this super tanker rock that's going to hit someday?
Yes. And we do talk about the changing demographics in Texas. You've seen a little bit of what's happened in Virginia, in part as a result of those same kinds of demographics. But I'm not willing to concede that we're inevitably going to become a democratic state. I'm hopeful. In part, this goes back to some efforts. Gosh, this is going to take you all down memory lane, but long ago and far away, when I was Republican County Chairman in Bexar County, San Antonio, you have a county that is, I want to get this generally right, 60% Hispanic, 10% Black, 30% Anglo. And over a period of just 4 or 5 years, given those demographics, we went from no countywide elected officials being Republicans to half, about 25 being Republicans. And obviously to be elected, they had to attract significant Hispanic support. And we made a point of targeting Hispanics. We made a point of, when you looked at a lineup of our candidates in Bexar County, half were minorities or women. And so it wasn't just talking theoretically. We were practicing what we were preaching. And we also realized that when Hispanics have incomes above $50,000, they suddenly become part of the middle class. Many of them are small business owners, and we get 40% of their vote. And so I think we need to do some targeting. We need to emphasize issues that are important to Hispanics. And I think that we can subsequently get our fair share and make and hold on to Texas and make inroads elsewhere. But it's going to require a major effort. Yes.
Okay, on that point, when they get over 50,000, 40% vote Republican, I've heard so other calculations along those lines. Do any Republicans in the caucus say we want to raise wages for Americans in order to bring working class people into the coalition? Does that ever come up?
It comes up. I don't know how frequently, and I think many of us are willing to see, wages go up and a little bit perhaps to make sure that Americans get the jobs that are now being held by illegal immigrants, for example. And that's one of the great selling points of E-Verify, and I think that's what makes it popular, is that we're really arguing behalf of the unemployed and underemployed American worker, and that includes citizens and legal immigrants both. So, I can't speak for a lot of people, but I think that we all would like to see Americans employed and American workers put first and get those available jobs.
Mr. Chairman, Art Arthur.
Yes.
You'd referenced Chairman Grassley's Secure Act. Could you comment on the interesting sanctuary cities policy that only punishes cities that are involved in the 287G program?
Well,
I think Art uncovered that.
Curtis Philp is with me in the back, who is counsel in the office and has been with me on the Judiciary Committee before. And I'm embarrassed because Curtis remembers everything that I did as chairman of the Judiciary Committee on Immigration, and I do not. On that question, I don't want to maybe make any comments about senators' proposals other than say that I think we should enforce the law when it comes to sanctuary cities, and I'm pleased with what the AG is doing, and I just think Attorney General Sessions is the best we could have, and the best we could have on immigration policy as well. And I miss him in the Senate, but he's doing a lot of good work there. But just to go back, I think we ought to enforce the law in sanctuary cities in whichever way we constitutionally can, whether it be government money or fines or whatever it might be.
And Congressman, I had a question too, specifically about E-Verify. You said that Chairman Goodlatte is, of the same mind on mandating the use of E-Verify. Have you talked to other people in the leadership, in the Republican leadership?
Yes.
Not just the Speaker, but other people, the majority leader and stuff. What is their thinking on
I've
this?
talked
Because
to-
it seems to me if everybody's for it, then what's the
why
problem?
aren't we doing it? I've
Right.
talked to every Republican leader. I've even handed them things in writing, and they all profess to be for E-Verify, and we'll have a chance to show that soon.
But is there sort of because remember, even President Obama said he was for E-Verify, but it was
Yeah.
all, once everybody gets an amnesty, well, then we'll concede to E-Verify. I mean, to some degree, that's kind of the problem, isn't it? What comes first?
What comes first, and everything needs to come together, or
Right.
probably nothing at all. We also have to give immigration a priority to begin with and make sure something gets to the House floor, and nothing has been scheduled yet.
Right, okay, good.
Okay.
Now, Representative Smith is going to have to
Okay.
leave right now. He's ignoring his staffer. You're going to have to leave us, I'm afraid, but we'll continue with questions after.
Yeah, thank you
Representative
very much, Congressman.
Thank you all, and apologize for leaving a little bit early,
That's
but
all right.
on the other hand, I'm leaving everybody in good hands, and I'll be well represented, so thank you.
Thank you. Were there other questions? Oh.
Oh, okay.
I actually had a question for Lindsay, and now you weren't on the Jordan Commission, obviously, but as the research director, you were there and you're part of the discussions. Were the commissioners and the senior staff, were they, did they expect what now we call E-Verify to actually happen politically? In other words, what did they see that as a difficult thing that was unlikely to ever happen, or was there a sense that, well, this is pretty obvious, so it should be obvious to everybody? In other words, did they understand the political will problem?
That's a tough question. The commission's first and foremost duty was to make recommendations on the way forward. It's the politicians' job to implement or move forward on that front. It's, of course, the people over at the then INS who actually implement as well. I can tell you that there was pretty much, well, there was always kind of an outlier on the commission, among the commissioners, but pretty much broad agreement that worksite enforcement was necessary. There was certainly a buy-in to the idea that you had to have a magnet.
And the outlier was the immigration lawyer?
Yeah. So so having said that, a lot of the things that the commissioners tried to do is simplify things. So let's not have a whole alphabet soup of different non-immigrant visas. Let's streamline them. Let's not have so many classes of family admission. Let's streamline them. There's always a rationale for why you do that. It's just not simply to simplify. But they also saw that the document requirements for the I-9 form were just untenable, and so they were big early proponents of the basic pilot, which has become E-Verify. And I think they thought that correctly implemented, E-Verify would be much more successful. And there's a lot of us who think that if you have successful paperwork at the work site, that alone will get most of the way you need to go. It works with, if you look, people complain about the document requirements under E-Verify. Documentation requirements are minimal compared to what you have to do for FLSA.
Which is what?
Fair Labor Standards Act, wage and hour kinds of requirements. They're fairly minimal compared to what you have to do with tax adherence. They're not even near as complicated or as costly as OSHA. So as a labor standard, I think that was the other way they were thinking about these things. And they really thought E-Verify would be helpful. When the lawyers decided that you could do E-Verify, but you had to maintain a parallel I-9 system, that was seen as not exactly what the commission had in mind. And the other thing that the commission had in mind, and at the Institute with Susan Martin, we've always emphasized, is a necessary step up in Department of Labor and wage and hour investigations as well, because some employers will sidestep these problems. That's where
Yeah,
we're at.
thank you. I actually had a question for, yeah, go ahead, Roy.
Yeah, a question for both of you. So on this failure of will, both in what you were watching in the 90s and then what's happened in the last few years. Okay, so you can see that the one reason you don't want to stop the hiring, you don't want workplace enforcement, you don't want to verify, is businesses want to continue to be able to hire illegal aliens. Or, in a larger sense, you do want the flow of illegal aliens to continue, either for business purposes or for political purposes. I'm just asking, is there any other reason? Is there any other reason to oppose? I mean, now that the businesses that use it are almost universally say it's a great system, and there's almost no sign of any discrimination. Is there any reason to oppose E-Verify other than you want the flow of illegal aliens to continue?
I think some folks on the liberal side of the divide see increasing, they make no distinction between illegal or legal. And they see anyone who lays claim to being an immigrant, and Roy used the term alien in order to make the point that an immigrant is someone admitted, at least under the law. There are a lot of people who really see this in an almost Thomas Paine sense of liberty, of expanding liberty, and that's automatically a good thing, and that the idea of limits, ipso facto limits, are wrong. And that this is all part of the great progressive advance of individual liberty. And you have pitted against that the fundamental, more conservative idea of the welfare of the community. We used to have a lot of liberals who were concerned about that conservative aspect, Barbara Jordan, Father Hesburgh, but over the past 20 years in particular, that has become politically incorrect among liberals in what Ron Brownstein calls the coalition of the ascendant, who unite in favor of basically open borders.
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer easily. As we know, immigration is it's odd bedfellows. So, go to the Cato website. They don't like E-Verify either. My father was a businessman. He said, don't make me a cop. I don't want to do that. A lot of that, to me, goes to the culture of the workplace. There was an argument at the time with workplace sanctions that if we had implemented them way back when, say, the Mexicans had recommended it, or in the 70s when this first came to the fore, that worksite enforcement, that is sanctions on unauthorized workers, would have been part of the culture. We would have just seen it that way and accepted that. Instead, it's dropped right in the middle of a culture wars of the kind of thing that I think Jerry's kind of suggesting. And it's because it's not just worksite enforcement, is it? It's all forms of fraud investigation and enforcement generally, which is just kind of lumped together loosely as something that's seen as repressive, and we don't want to do it. Now, that has a lot of deep American roots, and I think most of us kind of resonate a little bit with that. But the question is how you do it. It's always how you do it. And I think the way E-Verify works today, I would kind of concur with you. I don't see it as a big imposition. I don't see it as usually problematic. I don't see it as enough. It has to be universal. There has to be boots on the ground to enforce it. There should be stepped up Department of Labor investigations, because there are at least two kinds of employers. One kind of employer, and the one I run into in my work, say on the H-1B, where they're not really not exploiting these workers in a deep sense often. Employers just want to hire who they want to hire. I mean, it's almost that simple. They just don't get caught up in all this stuff. They showed up. They look good. I want to hire them. Don't tell me no. But you've got another kind of employer who really is looking for a strategy to get into the market in a way. And they will use unauthorized workers, and not just unauthorized workers.
If I could just add one thing quickly. There's been a tremendous increase in the ethic of inclusiveness or inclusion as almost a sacred value amongst many liberal folks. And immigration policy that sets limits is, by definition, exclusive. You are setting limits. You are defining the area in which you are allowing immigration to occur, and you're defining as illegal anything that exceeds those limits. A lot of people, especially younger liberals, seem to find that offensive.
I think I'm gonna ask one last question since I'm paying for the coffee and the microphone. But something Lindsay said was interesting. It resonated with something I remember. That in other words, that if we started this in the 40s or the 50s or the 60s, it would be kind of factored into business culture. I remember Dimitri Papadimitriou once, like 20 years ago or something, at some event said the goal would be to make legal employment a labor standard. And no one employs 11-year-olds to clean chimneys anymore. I mean, nobody even thinks of it. It's sort of been factored in, and that's essentially, I think, what we're trying to get to, is where it becomes accepted as a labor standard. The last question I wanted to ask, and I guess it's maybe more for Jerry, but maybe Lindsay has something to say. How much did Barbara Jordan's premature death actually affect the political direction this went into? Because the reason, Congressman Smith said President Clinton, abandoned their effort that he had earlier supported. Well, the reason he abandoned it is because Barbara Jordan passed away, and he wasn't able to get away with what he wanted to get away with because she had such moral authority that she was able to discipline him, at least in a sense, keep him on the straight and narrow. So I was just wondering if either one of you had thoughts on how much her death affected this.
I think a great deal. Al Simpson said it was a terrible blow to his efforts in the Senate. I think that Bill Clinton, having appointed Barbara Jordan, and Barbara Jordan was a towering figure, particularly at that time. No one ever questioned her credibility or her bona fides. When her voice was silenced, it was a terrible blow, and it made it easier for Clinton to back off his earlier statements of support for the recommendations of the commission. Lindsay?
I mean, you certainly hear that, and I think it's the case. And the moral voices that were left, the ones some of us still admire deeply to this day, like Doris Meisner, she saw her role at INS in different kinds of ways, and a lot of that carried out differently. So I think it was a big difference.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap it up here to respect people's time. Thank you to Jerry and to Lindsay. Thank you in absentia to the congressman. And this will all be up on our website in a number of days. I appreciate it and hope to see you at our next event. Thank you.
Great effort.